So, yep. Hi everyone. Welcome to coming. Welcome to Product Council today. Thanks for coming. Um, if you're watching this live, great. You can ask questions as we go through. If you're watching the recording, then I'm afraid you'll have to just reach out to Vishal directly. He's on Slack, so shouldn't be a problem. So today, Vishal is who's been a member of the community for quite a long time, just more of an observer than an active participant, but he's seeking to change that. And as part of that, he's presenting a proposal today for a workstream to define, design, and prototype B2B payment use cases on Mojaloop. We have plenty of P2P and merchant payments, P2M, etc. But B2B isn't something that we've necessarily focused on. And Vishal's contention is that while Mojaloop has matured in those retail payments, B2B transactions remain underserved. And he has a few proposals uh, to help us all address that gap. So I'll pass over to you, Vishal, and we'll open it for questions at the end if there's time.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Paul. Nice to meet everyone. I do recognize some names and faces. So Steve, nice to see you. Sam obviously has been great in helping, and Paul, thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, so just to build on what Paul was saying, I have been an observer in the community for probably about 9, 10 months, give or take. But I've been, like Paul said, I've been trying to actively change that. I think the other thing is, like I was mentioning just a bit earlier on the call, I'm originally from South Africa. I was telling Justice, I'm originally from South Africa, but I've been based in Toronto for the past couple of years, and that's where the Mojaloop interest has really come about. I think a lot of my learning is still, I'm learning as I go along. I think some of the technical aspects, as you'll see in this presentation that I've put together, I don't know if Paul had shared that, but I think it's probably not fleshed out, but that's fine. But yeah, just a big thank you to Sam, who's been fantastic and just guiding me, as well as Steve, who's also pushed me in the right direction. So just with
On
that,
the question of sharing, Vishal, I always share the presentation after, so
oh, okay, perfect.
people don't
Okay,
get sneak peeks.
okay, perfect. Thank you, Paul. So I'm just going to quickly share. Let's see if I can bring this up. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it in this view for now, if that's okay. I'll just make this smaller, because I've only got one screen, so I can't exactly tell. Please feel free to come off mute if you have any questions. I probably might not be able to answer all the technical related aspects, but using the recording as well as my own notes over here, I'll get back to you afterwards. So yeah, we can take it from that. So essentially, just where it's come from is I'll just provide an overview of what I've seen, at least. I think the goal for today, I'm not seeking an approval. I'm seeking more or less a feedback. But if there's an approval, that's great. If not, that's fine. And then we'll build and figure it out after that. So just in terms of what I had observed, so Mojaloop excels in the retail space. I think a lot of the infrastructure is catered for that. And my understanding and observation from previous work was that the B2B space has been rather underserved. So it's not that it's not there, it's not that the capabilities are not there. I think there's an opportunity to really get into that space. Obviously, from a strategy point of view and market point of view, the B2B space is continuing to grow in emerging markets, and there's a massive need. And yesterday, in fact, there was an article that I read in South African news that there's I think a fintech business from Dubai that's come in and it's tied up with one of the big banks in South Africa, and it's going to be serving that sort of market category. So the impact that I'd identified and quantified is that small to medium enterprises and corporates need interoperability, as well as low cost rails for supplier payments, invoicing settlements, payrolls, and trade, and maybe more specifically cross border trade as well. Again, if you feel a lot of this already exists within the environment, please feel free to just comment in the chat, or you could even just find the relevant resources and direct me to that. And the regulatory pull, I'm just going to continue here, is that the formalization of these B2B flows does support that leasing aspect as well as reporting. And the market pull and the market opportunity is that digital financial service providers, as well as fintech businesses, do seek embedded trade finance, including things like invoicing, foreign exchange, and transparency around fees. And that's something I think the market has shown, whereby the businesses that have really done well in emerging markets are those that have had complete transparencies and established trust with businesses. And the strategic fit, at least from a Mojaloop point of view, to build on what Paul was saying as well, is that it does expand Mojaloop's addressable volume and deepens the network effects as well. So just in terms of the workflow that I had created and identified, and this is small, so it will go out afterwards, but if I can just, no, this is too small. And Sam did suggest that I make this larger, but I'll maybe just speak around it a little bit. So in this case, what we've got is a couple of steps in the process. I call the first step a bit of a party discovery, whereby the originator calls the leasing aspect with the the payer's chosen identifier, and in this case, that can be a business account ID. This aspect then resolves the party and returns the payee to the digital financial service provider's infrastructure. And at this point, and the ideal would be that it integrates with some sort of ERP on both businesses aspect. And at this point, the ERP can either store the normalized payee's identity as well as the routing structures. The second step is, I call it around an optional customer authorization or some sort of transaction request, where we need to use a transaction request to step up authentication. So whether that's asking the switch to gather consent, whether that's the OTP, the PIN, or the QR code. But if the channel already does strong customer authorization, we could potentially skip the step and go straight to quoting. The third step, as you'd all be familiar with, is around a quotation or a quoting service, where we price the transfer. And in this case, the originator posts the quoting request, and the quoting then consults the payee DFSP for fees for the forex aspect or the acceptance, and then returns the final quotation. I'm still trying to understand and figure out what's happening, understanding the Mojaloop infrastructure with regards to that. And my apology if that's fundamental that I've missed out. But if you're open to directing me to that, obviously I will build this out over time. But that is something that I will consider. And just to go and build on to this is that the ERP would then also know the debit amount as well as the expected payee receiving amount. I just want to see if maybe I can paste this in the chat. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second. I don't know if I'll be able to. Oh, no. Okay. I can't seem to paste that. Okay, let's just go back to sharing. Okay. Just going back here. I'm just going through my notes. Yeah, the fourth step. So the third step was around quotation. The fourth step will be around the transfer, which will consider the switch as well. And in this case, it's just to move the funds. So in this, when the funds get moved, to move the funds rather, the originator will send the transfer using the packet and the condition from the quote. And the switch will reserve the position and notify both parties, so both service providers. Thereafter, the payee would then fulfill by sending a fulfillment that fulfills the conditions, and the switcher would verify and commit, whereby the payer would be debited, and the payee would be credited automatically. If anything, if it expires or falls back, it just rolls back. The fifth step is around the settlement windows and the reporting, and that's obviously the bigger portion here, whereby the committed transfers would accrue into a settlement window, and when that window would close, the central settlement would compute any net positions per the service provider, as well as issuing of those reports. Those external funds would be done in according with movements per the scheme's model, and it would defer any payments or any losses thereafter. And the ERP system would then, that the business uses, consumes those files or clears any suspended accounts. I know Sam did mention that there are other elements other than webhooks, but I considered webhooks into ERPs just purely from the point of view that it is relatively cost effective. And to drive that aspect, we would post those ERPs from reliable hooks, considering aspects such as preparation, commitments, and settlements. And we ensure exactly once we've posted those, transfer IDs, we could reconcile those three views on a daily basis. So in this case, what would be, I just want to go into the next slide. What would be those guardrails? And I considered those guardrails to be either synchronized with standard codes or error callbacks. Also having aspects such as quotes and transfers would have expiries, as well as retries to monitor any liquidity, any limits, or callback health. And in all of this, we trace every hop with correlation IDs. So of course, those are just some aspects that I'm considering with regards to the workflow. But yeah, and in terms of the deployment, and that's where a lot of my work with Sam's been happening at the moment, to align it in terms of a Helm deployment, at least for now. So at the switch, we would deploy the leasing aspect, the quoting, the transaction requests, the ML APIs, the switches, as well as the central settlement. So essentially all those core infrastructure for Mojaloop. And I was considering an aspect of observability just purely from a point of view of monitoring. And I was thinking around Prometheus or Grafana, but I just said, I think for now, let me just rather build a very basic use case in Helm, and we can take it from there. So in terms of the scope, some of the aspects that I was considering is to define and prioritize those business-to-business banking use cases. So whether that would be supply payments, whether that's domestic or cross-border. And I was working on a simulation environment as well to be able to help me with that. Whether that's SME payroll or invoice settlements. And in terms of the design and the prototypes, we could have bulk or scheduled payments via the switch, having the business identifier solutions, such as VAT, company registration number. I'm unfamiliar with Swift or BIC at this stage, but I will dig into that if that is available within Mojaloop, as well as that ERP to Mojaloop reference integration using webhooks. And potential outputs could be the requirements gathering, reference APIs, as well as the sandbox demo and a technical guide. In terms of the target use cases, like I mentioned, it would be around domestic supplier pay, so service provider to service provider with fees and taxes handling. Invoice-based settlements, so the service provider to our ERP with transaction request approval, the SME payroll that I'd mentioned before, as well as the cross-border trade pilot, which could be a stretch, but just having the quoting service, the forex, and the compliance checks. This was the architecture that I'd outlined at this stage. I had used a tool to help me with this, but this is just what I was considering. So let's see if I can just go in here a little bit. So just with regards to that ERP, which forms the touch points between the DFSP as well as the switch and the business. So initiating a batch payment or initial payment, linking that with the originator DFSP that I was talking about, which would limit and position any caches and integrate with channels and API gateways, which would then go into the payment orchestrator. And all of this would be communicating with the ERP via callbacks or webhooks. Thereafter, it would go into the compliance or policy engine. Again, I think I'm still busy fleshing this out just to emphasize my point. So happy to take feedback on this diagram as well. So having the compliance and policy engine in place, and it would integrate with that aspect. but thereafter going into the switch whereby we would have the account lookup service, the transaction request, and the quoting service, as well as the API adapters to post all those aspects, all the transactions with the originator DFSPs. I know I made reference to the central ledger here, but I think it's the correct terminology is the switch here. Following that, it would then integrate with the settlement management process flow, and then go into the beneficiary account systems. So this was just at a glance what I was considering in terms of the architecture. There's also the external service providers aspects, which would include regulatory reporting as well as the Forex and quotation service providers. In terms of the sandbox and the deployment, this is just a side note that I wanted to include, whereby this is part of the deployment stream and working with Sam on deployments already, because I'm building out my skills and capabilities in that. So in terms of the environment, we'd be building this out in the sandbox, using simulators as well as relevant toolkits. My demonstration goals would be to run an end-to-end domestic supplier payment in a batch of 10. I said batch of 10 just as a point of reference, could even be batch of 5. To show the business ID resolution and the approval step that I was talking about. In terms of some of the artifacts that I'd like to consider was that Postman and toolkit collections, the sample ERP connectors, as well as the test data and the runbooks. And success metrics that I was considering was to have a success rate of more than 98% in demo scenarios, to have clear logs and reports. And the log aspect I considered because when I was doing some Helm deployments, I was receiving a lot of logs with errors, and Sam had helped me to identify those errors. And I just think for me as a success factor is just to have clear logs and reporting. Some of the acceptance criteria that I was considering here is to have a requirements document with greater than 3 validated business-to-business use cases, to have that fork with the business-to-business extensions on the Mojaloop switch, a live sandbox demonstration of the business-to-business banking flow, and having a community alignment with adopters and regulators, and hence this meeting as well. Some of the KPIs that I was considering was the time to settle needs to be within a 95th percentile number, looking at batch success rate, approval latencies, reconciliation accuracy, as well as the API error budgeting with the integrations to the ERPs. My product console asks, or permission, is seeking to have an approval for this initiative. My timeline, and I mean, these were just very high level numbers that I was considering. Sorry, it should be 29, not 28. Is more or less a 3-month timeline to build a demo. So 2 weeks of discovery, just building out my own understanding of this product. 3 to 5 weeks for design, 6 to 8 weeks for prototyping, doing a demo in about 2 months' time, and then deployment and documentation thereafter. I'm also trying to understand and seeking your guidance on this as well. If this is a fit, and if this is a market fit, is this a problem that I'm seeing, or is this a problem that the market is seeing? And obviously, I don't have that complete visibility just yet. And yeah, the other aspects is, let's just go back here. Some of the risks I had identified are aspects like scope creep, identifier governance. Could there be edge cases in the batch processing, as well as compliance nuances that I would not have considered that would creep up in this? And some of the mitigations that I have for that is a very strict minimum viable product. So having very strong guardrails over there, and having regulator design reviews as often as possible. And my asks for this is to endorse this scope. Again, it should be 29, not 28. Approve the namespace additions for business identifiers. If possible, nominate DFSPs and ERP partners for the sandbox demo. Or alternatively, I'll just simulate something on my end, and to confirm the review windows as to what's possible within the governance guardrails for within this Mojaloop environment. So I'll pause here and see what comes up, if there are any questions. And I know it's not perfect. I think I'm still learning as I go along, but I'd love your feedback and your criticisms and your reviews. And yeah, we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you,
Just
Vishal.
going back to
That was very, very interesting, very useful. I think there's a very positive message here in terms of the availability of B2B payments. A lot of what we need in order to support B2B payments is already there in the metadata around a transaction. It is about visibility and people's awareness of that. I'm glad to hear that you've been working with Sam on this, but I think there's some refinement needed in some areas of your deck, particularly around flows. But that's
Sure.
detail. That's detail. We can worry about that. Worry about that later. So I'd like to open this more widely and really ask if anyone has any questions here. On messaging, I'm interested to hear what the GTM team have to say. I can see there's a few of you on the call. And on the general estimate of work required, effort required, I'd be interested to hear from perhaps some of the other more engineering focused members of Product Council. So please, guys, speak up. Nope. No one good to jump in?
Feedback, thoughts, perspectives. Yeah, Paul, to your point, I think the flows thing, definitely. I'll definitely work on that. Architecture, any suggestions?
Architecture, I didn't have a great deal to comment on that. Julie, you've raised your hand. Did you want to say anything?
Yes, I think on this, I wanted to go back on one of the previous slides where there was a ERP mention.
Yeah, I'll bring it up. Just 1 second. There are quite a few, so I'll just find it somewhere here.
No.
No, I just I was
Right,
kept yeah,
right,
exactly.
8. Yeah.
So I think yeah, I'm not sure this is the right forum because I know there are a lot of people on the call, but I think I'd be keen to dig deeper on this point. Especially because right now, not all ERP are able to initiate a payment or a batch, right? And especially when we look at a wide range of basically SMEs and potentially like under B2B. I know you mentioned a lot SMEs, but I do feel that it touches on corporate, and ideally we would want the solutions that work for both. So the sophistication of the ERP will be different.
Yes.
And I also think that on the callbacks or web blocks, it's also like it would be nice to perhaps start targeting for the POC a specific DRP and understand like, what is the connection layer and what format they consume and I know, for example, there was discussion around ERP consuming directly ISO 222 messages, but I'm not sure this is actually in production and in action. So yeah, that would be my main input. And I think for this reason as well on the ERP system, for me, we're probably looking at if it's going through a payment orchestrator and so on. I wouldn't recommend that FSPIOP is used in this case because that's a proprietary format.
I see. Thank you for that, Julie. Which format do you think which forum could I make? And I can chat to you on Slack, but could you direct me into which forum this could go into?
We'd normally establish a particular sequence of meetings around a work stream that has been adopted. So
Okay.
weekly or fortnightly, however we saw fit, in order to drive down into detail. And I think possibly that's what Julie was referring to. I'm sure Julie would also be willing to have one-to-one meetings about this to help find.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
Michael.
there's another hand. Michael, yeah.
Michael, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. It was one of those meetings that automatically mutes you, I now realise. So there's this, I think, represents a fundamental change to Mojaloop's architecture, which is not to say that it shouldn't happen, but it is a fundamental change. So at the moment, Mojaloop payments are exchanged between financial institutions of various kinds. There is no, and although we have facilities for external systems, which might include ERPs, to connect, all they do effectively is request a payment from a financial institution. And it's the financial institution which manages that payment and is responsible for accepting the obligations that arise as a result of making that payment. Now, if correct me if I'm wrong, Vishal, but I thought that your architectural diagram envisaged a direct interaction between an ERP and the Mojaloop scheme in order to execute a payment.
Michael, thank you for that. So that's what I was envisioning. However, I don't wish to fundamentally change the architecture that Mojaloop's already created, the ecosystems there, and obviously I just want to expand on it. However, if I hear your statement, the ERP would have to speak to a financial institution to initiate the payment, as opposed to integrating directly, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So essentially, the ERP says we create a relationship between the ERP and an account at the bank, such that the bank agrees that the ERP can legitimately ask for that account to be debited. Then the ERP sends a message to the bank saying, I would like to make this payment to this person. Please organise it. The bank then goes through the quoting process, as you described it, and then comes back to the ERP in this case and says, here are the characteristics of the payment. Here is how much your account will be debited. Here is how much the beneficiary's account will be credited. Please obtain approval for this payment from someone who is authorised to provide it, and that might be it might be a FIDO request. It might be a one-time PIN. Could be whatever. But once that approval is returned, then again it's the bank that goes ahead and executes the payment.
I see.
Because it's the bank who is responsible to the Mojaloop scheme for eventually settling the payment.
Okay. So I think what I'm also hearing is that architecture diagram of flow needs to be altered a little bit to be able to take that into consideration. So I'll definitely do that, Michael. Yeah, I don't want to, with as little change as possible to the fundamental architecture. That's what I've envisioned. So I'll definitely make that change.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry,
the architecture is clearly, from a Mojaloop perspective, correct, but that's, to me, is a relatively straightforward fix.
Sure. Sure.
just a slight refocus.
Sure.
The more important aspect for me is, do we as a group feel that this is a gap that needs to be addressed, and is this a valid way of addressing it? I think I'd like to get some views on that if possible.
It certainly sounds interesting. I mean, and this is something we are doing right now.
Yep.
So we are, we're currently implementing an international system to support business payments. Now, it may very well be that the sorts of things that you are proposing, Vishal, would be much more interesting and helpful. Because essentially, we're getting the underlying Mojaloop system, which manages the payments, in place first. But the plan for the implementers is then to add further services on top of that to make it easier for companies, MSMEs, in their jurisdiction. To essentially, the point of this system is to increase trade between international trade in parts of Africa. So it might very well be something that they would be interested in doing, and as I say, interested in doing it right now.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. As I said at the start, the Mojaloop protocols already already make provision for carrying all of the metadata that would be required to support this. In all of the various parameters. And one of the things that strikes me is that we already have a workstream. We've already had a merchant payments workstream, and I envisage that being revived in order to extend its functionality. But we also have a very active workstream at the moment on addressing payments using LEIs. I don't know if you're aware of that workstream, Vishal.
No,
so, an LEI being a legal entity identifier. I don't know if you're aware of them. It's a global standard for a unique identifier for legal entities, meaning companies, businesses, and charities, etc. Yes, that seems to me a complementary workstream to this one.
Sure.
Perhaps we can pursue that a little further. Justice, you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry.
No. I was just going to, in response to your question about whether or not this is worth doing, I have sort of two observations. One, just off the back of what Michael said, that if there is foundational architecture to support something like this, to allow for the extension of the ecosystem into a new use case, this is a great test for the extensibility of the platform as well, because you're saying the platform can extend. This is definitely putting your money where your mouth is. And then the second thing for me is more around sort of product strategy, I guess. If you are a company who wants to be able to offer this kind of business, so currently you have a person-to-person switch or a retail payment switch, and you want to be able to expand that, if Mojaloop is not capable or willing of offering this additional functionality as it's required, you're forcing that particular switch or that customer to find a complementary solution. And that undermines overall Mojaloop's value proposition out of the box. So from that perspective, I think it's definitely always worth expanding your product to be able to support the growing demand of your customers. Your customers in Mojaloop in particular would start small. It will start off with peer-to-peer, which is the easy use case, the initial one. And I think it follows Mojaloop's own growth trajectory over the last 5 years. Peer-to-peer, retail payments, business-to-business just sounds like a natural evolution of the product strategy.
Yes, I would agree. But to emphasize again, the Mojaloop core as it stands can already do all this stuff. But we do have this philosophy that we've adopted over the last couple of years of a set of overlay services around Mojaloop that provide functionalities such as merchant payments, B2B, whatever it might be. And that's where I see that this particular workstream fits. It's that overlay layer which utilizes the core capabilities of the hub but adds meaning to the external parties. And I think that's where probably the value of this potential work stream lies. Michael.
I agree with you, and I think I might like to go even a little further than that, and say that it seems to me that wrapped up in what Vishal is proposing is an idea that we haven't really thought much about before, but perhaps we should. And that's an idea that says there should be, if you imagine, there are different ERP services. Each company, each business has its own ERP service, and each business will want to connect to the Mojaloop system in order to make and receive payments. What that essentially means at the moment is that each of those ERP systems will need to develop their own way of doing standard things. The standard things that all businesses want to do. Now, one of the things that we might say is there's a layer on top of the Mojaloop interfaces that we currently provide, which is building open source tools that ERP users can build into their interactions with Mojaloop to provide functionality, which is effectively generic functionality, without having to develop it each time themselves. Now, as I say, we don't have anything like that at the moment, at least not as far as I'm aware. We don't have anything like that at the moment. But the sort of thing I think that Vishal is proposing might lend itself very well to the construction of overlay services on that model. I don't know what you think about that, Vishal.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I've been envisioning. Just to add, it's not a full scale, it's an adaptation more than anything. So I'm aware and I probably don't know all the initiatives and tools that exist just yet, but I think it is just to provide that overlay service, that's overlay service to parts of the offering that already exists within Mojaloop. Does that answer your question, Richard? Michael?
Yeah, I think it does. The problem there is, of course, as I say, different companies will have different ERPs. Now, some of them are packages that they share, but a lot of them will be companies that have developed their own ERPs. Now, and the question is, if you're trying to build overlay services which users of different ERPs can use, that's potentially I won't say it's a problem, but it's certainly a difficult task to strike a level of generality that makes it generally usable without making it so abstract that everybody's essentially got to do most of the work themselves is, in my experience, quite a difficult trick to pull off.
Yeah. I think there'll definitely be some nuances. Look, to minimize the scope creep, or to minimize the scope, could it make sense that we only target one type of ERP or one product of ERP? And I say ERP loosely, but I'm saying just a system that the business is using to manage their enterprise. And maybe, absolutely, Michael, we could connect over there. I think there's some value and some wisdom that you've got there that maybe I can just tap into, and you could direct me what that might look like. How does that land? What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, I'll be very happy to do that. Yes.
I think the feeling is that there is value in what you're proposing here, Vishal. As ever, though, we are constrained by the available engineering resource to actually build things here. So I would suggest that perhaps we schedule a call, perhaps, maybe a fortnightly call to begin with, where we can start to drive down on perhaps some of the more details, and we can work on the flow, and we can talk about the work that is actually needed, so we can start to get this work stream to come to something that maybe somebody could pick up and do and contribute some engineering effort to. Is that okay?
Cool. That's perfect. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. just from a point of view of attendees on the call, Paul, would it just be yourself? Who else would you want typically?
Well, what we do, well, it'd be myself and anyone else who's interested.
Okay.
The way we would normally do it is announce it on Product Council to begin with, on the Product Council Slack channel. And we would create a separate Slack channel for this work stream and get as many people as are interested to subscribe to that Slack channel and try and build it from there. It all depends on whether there is community interest. We can try and drive that forward, but in the end, we are looking for people willing to make a voluntary contribution. So
absolutely.
I suggest we we set up an initial mini workshop call, perhaps sometime in the next week or so, and we'll just see how many people express an interest and try and take it from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, thank you. I think let's just be open and curious, and if it goes somewhere, great, and if it doesn't, that's also fine. I'll also reach out to Michael. I have already messaged Julie as well, and in between now and the next call in about 2 weeks' time, that I can set it up and we can take it from there.
Yep. Michael says he's in Mexico next week. Okay, so we'll make it the week after then, Michael.
Perfect. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Paul, anything else from your side?
Not from my side, no. So thank you, Vishal. That's been a really interesting session. So
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I know Sam's still here. Just want to thank him as well. And also Steve for just guiding me along the journey. And yeah, just curious and keen to keep building my skills in Mojaloop as well.
Yep.
Great. Vishal. I think it's going to be a valuable addition once it's complete for Mojaloop. So thanks for offering to do this. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you. And you're a very welcome addition to the community as well, Vishal. So.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, if you don't mind, I've just got maybe 2 or 3 changes to make to the presentation. I'll do it right now. I can email it to you, and then will you send it out to everyone?
I will send it out. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. I'll email it to you right now. I just want to quickly make 2, 3 changes. Okay.
Great. Okay.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much. And I suggest we end it there. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Have a great day. Bye.